And we're live!
Hello!
Hello!
La, la, la. Hello, welcome. It is Monday night, Generational Change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter.
I feel like I've been in a bubble for a really long time because up until today, it was summer officially, and then...
It's still summer!
It is, I know, but
the
today...
kids are back to school.
Right. Today, I took Reese to the airport, and Graham's first day of school, so...
Graham's not in class.
I know.
Impressive.
I know. So because of that, I feel like I've been out of the loop for the past week, especially since my baby's been home. So I haven't necessarily been following a lot of the current events.
Angie, Chris, Mario, great to see you guys. Yes, please smash that like button. Let's get this out there to as many people as possible. We are going to have Max Alvarez of the Real News Network on.
We're going to be talking UAW strike.
Which is very, very important.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen this trajectory ever since the midterm elections, when what was considered to be the most likely scenario of the presidential election, considering all of the follies of President Trump, former President Trump, that it was going to be Joe Biden, unfortunately, against Ron DeSantis, even more unfortunate. But a couple of things happened along the way. At last year's midterms, of course, there was Joe Biden deciding that he was going to break the strike of the railroad workers, and Governor DeSantis decided that he really wants to show that women do not have a right to control their own body. That's a no-no as well. So, as you can see...
It's a no-go, Ron.
Yeah, the approval ratings of these guys have literally been in the toilet, and I don't see how they're going to get their way out of it.
I have a list. Like, I'm going to come up with, like, my list of demands. I actually would like to have a list so that anybody who questions whether or not I could get in line behind Joe could look at any number of things on my list that Joe could do wherein it would get me to, you know, maybe go in his direction. And that way, the onus shouldn't be on me, really. Like, but I just to keep things simple for people, I could just hold up a list and say any of these things, and I might be with you.
Yeah, of course. Unfortunately, that would require going against the corporate special interests of this country. And that's not likely to happen.
No.
And as a lot of people have been focused on Hunter Biden and his wheelings and dealings as the Fredo, as we like to say, of the Biden family, who has been the conduit for what goes on behind the scenes, particularly with Ukraine. There is no denying that. But
we go to the anti-Fredo.
We do go to the anti-Fredo. Of course, on the other side is the very devious behavior that is taking place on the Trump side of the family, which, of course, deals with the Saudis. And that, of course, is with Jared Kushner. So before we bring in Max Alvarez and our other guest of the evening from the UAW Workers, we are going to discuss, however briefly, a very important story related to none other than Jared Kushner. Now, for those of you who know, Jared Kushner has been closely tied to President Trump for quite some time.
Yeah, he's family.
Yeah, and his father, of course, did go to federal prison for crimes, financial crimes, not a surprise. This one right here?
Yeah, I think it's better.
Let's see how it goes. All right, so now you get to see even more of the screen.
Exactly.
See, I'm learning all these little tricks of the trade.
It's just better, I think.
Well, it does look better.
I know.
Now you can see more. So Jared Kushner's shady $2 billion Saudi deal, unprecedented, says Wall Street investor. I haven't seen anything like this. Well, what haven't they seen that makes this so obscene? Apparently, there really hasn't been any real use of this money. So why would that be? Why would they be hoarding cash at such a obscene level, Jen?
Wait, who's doing the hoarding again? I'm sorry. I drifted off. I heard blah, blah, blah.
The Saudis gave Jared Kushner $2 billion to invest for them.
I didn't know any of this was like, this is news? Like, I already thought we knew that they were in with the Saudis and that all these business deals and transactions and sales of weapons and and them staying at Trump hotels. And like, I always thought we knew this, but what's the news?
The news here is that Kushner's PE firm received 64.5% of the AUM from Saudi Arabia, while U.S. investors contributed only a paltry amount of $31 million. Now, of course, $31 million out of $2 billion is a very small amount. It's 1.5%. It's pretty small. And that also goes to show you just how much $1 billion really is. The fact that people can't even really wrap their minds around this type of wealth is insane. Investor Steve Ratner says he doesn't expect the Saudis to make a lot on their investment anytime soon. So then the question becomes, why exactly are the Saudis giving Jared Kushner, who is basically the consigliere to Donald Trump $2 billion. What would be the motivation for them to give such obscene amount of money?
Well, what is it that they want?
The $2 billion investment.
What do they want?
Former President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner received for his private equity firm. Remember, the biggest private equity firm in the world is BlackRock. So that'll give you an idea of exactly what Affinity Partners is up to, has continued to stir up controversy. Investor and economic analyst Steve Ratner recently said, found the deal to be highly unusual. Why would it be unusual? Jared Kushner spent much of his White House tenure cozying up to Saudi Arabia and its Crown Prince and Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman. The investor noted that 6 months after Kushner left Washington, Kushner's private equity firm landed $2 billion in investments from the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund. Ratner shared a chart showing a breakdown of the sources from which Kushner's Affinity Partners received its assets under management. This is definitely, speaking about the merely 1%, 1.5% of funding from U.S. investors, Ratner said that many private equity funds go outside the U.S. for money, usually contributing from Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds making up around 10% or up to 30%. In this case, it's about 98.5%.
Right.
It's extraordinary, unprecedented. I haven't seen anything like this. And don't get me wrong, Stephen Ratner, as bougie, upper class, establishment, in the tank, neoliberal as it could possibly get. But what I've always tend to point out when it comes to people on the Democratic side complaining about Republicans and Republicans complaining about Democrats, almost all the time, it's usually accurate. It's the scrutiny of your own people that tends to not be accurate. So this chart right here is giving you a pretty good idea of exactly how this money is broken down. You're looking at $2 billion, $3.1 billion for Affinity Partners. $2 billion coming from Saudi Arabia, $200 million coming from the United Arab Emirates, $200 million coming from Qatar, and then $625 million of basically what they're saying here, unaccounted money.
That's the slush fund.
That's the dark money, if you will.
That's dark. Oh, it's dark. But here's what is so like telling is that we're talking about a person who basically reports on corruption and filth, and this is something that they find sort of unprecedented. That's very impressive right there. That's some impressive amount of corruption.
As Miss Anonymous likes to point out, yes, a reporter went missing. You almost have to wonder under what pretenses. This is pretty serious stuff right here.
Are you talking which reporter? Are you talking about Khashoggi?
It's very possible that this is what Khashoggi may have been reporting on. You know, this is the reality of the way these things work. The only reason why Kushner is not getting the heavy dose of the spotlight right now is because Trump is not in the White House. He's already dealing with his 4 indictments for the litany of things that they're trying to charge him with. In this case, Jared Kushner has basically been flying under the radar because his equivalent in the Biden administration, Hunter Biden, has his own wheelings and dealings that is on the spotlight on him right now. Now, is Hunter Biden involved with as much financial wheelings and dealings at the level that Jared Kushner is involved in? No.
I don't know. He's nowhere near as smart as Jared Kushner either.
That's the rub.
That's the thing.
Jared Kushner
is a lot more dangerous.
Jared Kushner reminds me of American Psycho. Like he's probably genius level like psychopath, and that's very dangerous because a lot of times they do put these Fredo-like individuals in charge of these types of operations.
Okay, Jared Kushner ain't no Fredo.
He's definitely not no Fredo. Is he a Michael?
I don't know.
Is he a Sonny? Is he a Tom Hagen?
He's just not afraid of. No, but I think that's interesting. Like that. But is it, and Metalopoly questions, is there anything illegal? And no, not apparent. I mean, it doesn't seem to be that's what they're saying. But that definitely is a very interesting conflict of interest during a time when it shouldn't be a conflict of interest.
Here's the problem.
Serious appearance of impropriety there for sure.
And I do have a theory on this because the gist of this story, why this story is so important. Why is this story so important? Because what they're essentially saying is that Jared Kushner, through his private equity firm, aka the real system that's been created through Wall Street to essentially protect private dark money. He's sitting on over $3 billion from the most powerful oil nations in the world. So why would he be doing something like that? I think it's pretty simple. Because ultimately, this is the private dark money that is going to be allocated towards Trump in the general election. And why would they do that? Because if Trump ultimately is in the White House again, he is going to do very favorable business dealings again with the Saudi royal family, no different than what he did when he was president the first time.
So you're basically looking at it as general election fundraising. Okay.
One thing about the Saudis.
Yeah, I mean,
one thing about the Saudis, they hedge their bets. They don't take any chances.
Yeah.
For them, you know, and we could have done a story, as much as it really has of no interest, I'm sure, to you, as it really isn't of much interest to me either. But it turns out that one of the reasons why golf star, you could even say superstar, depending on how you measure it, Phil Mickelson, who made the deal with the Saudi golf organization.
That live. Mm-hmm. I know about it.
So now it turns out that
they're merging.
The biggest reason that the deal was put together by is because apparently he has a serious gambling addiction to the tune of tens of millions of dollars.
Oh.
So he was in the hole deep. And the Saudis decided that they found their mark. We're going to bail him out. So beautiful.
Oh, okay. Isn't that nice when you put all the pieces together? Like you say, most people
like
you see like, right, you have to put it all together.
Yeah.
That's interesting. But now it's merging. I saw that. That whole thing. I mean, look, I find golf, I'd rather watch paint dry. And so the idea of even news about something that I find boring is even more boring. But I was aware of that, interestingly enough.
If you're going to call out the crimes and misdemeanors of a one Hunter Biden, which we have done, you have to call out the same BS when it's coming from Jared Kushner.
I just don't understand how there's any comparison in terms of the threat level. The threat level of Hunter Biden is, I think, to himself, you know, I mean, I don't know.
No, Hunter Biden is a useful idiot.
Yeah, but he's just, but I feel like Jared Kushner
doesn't need Donald Trump holding his hand.
I honestly, he has a striking resemblance to like Paul Wolfowitz to me. And I don't know if that's just in my head or like whatever, but like he's very like,
I pointed out, you know, when your own father went to federal prison for financial crimes, it's not hard to believe that maybe Pop taught you a few things.
He's learned a few things. He's learned a few things. And he's perfected the skill. It's like a lot of things. Like we can perfect it. Every generation gets better at certain things.
Oh, absolutely. So if you're going to call it one way, you got to call it the other way. But why is it that people are so silent about this particular story? It isn't because they want to protect Donald Trump. It's because they want to protect Saudi Arabia. Nothing more, nothing less. That's it. So without further ado, we do have our wonderful guests of the evening. And as you know, we are really trying to transform politics into service, and that service comes through the labor movement, because that's the only way we're ever going to save ourselves. As much as people believe that you can save it at the ballot box, that is certainly not the case.
No.
But as we have seen over the past 9 months, things have not been working out too well in terms of what's happening at the very top in the labor movement. However, it does appear that the United Auto Workers of America may be onto something pretty damn significant right now. And it is not being talked about in corporate media.
No, of course not.
Why would they talk about it? And if anybody knows a thing or two about what it means to really build that labor strength through mass coalitions across the United States, it is our good friend from the Real News Network, Max Alvarez. Welcome back to Generational Change.
Hey guys, great to see you. Thanks for having me back on.
Hey Max, you look good. What's going on?
Hey, right back at you, sister. I'm chilling. A lot going on in the country. Like you said, it's like we got 2 seconds to catch our breath after the UPS contract fight. Now it's right back into it with UAW, SAG-AFTRA, WGA, still on strike. I mean, there's still a lot of workers out there who need our support, including folks who have been holding the line for months, if not years. I'm talking about folks on strike at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette who are approaching 1 year on strike there in October. I'm talking about performers at Medieval Times. I'm talking about grad student workers at the University of Michigan, my alma mater. Shout out to GEO, my former union. If we want to see workers win their fights against the bosses and against corporate oligarchy and turn the tide and fight for an economy that works for all of us, we all have a stake in ensuring that workers win those struggles. And when workers win, then more workers want to get into the fight, right? So it's not, I just want to say up top for folks out there watching, as important as the UAW contract fight is, if we want it to succeed, we have to also dig deep, invest, and make sure that our fellow workers who are already on strike, who are already fighting for their first union contract at Starbucks, at Chipotle, at Amazon, so on and so forth, we need to make sure that they win. And then when they win, they're going to come help others win. So that's how we keep things moving. But tonight, yeah, we got a lot to dig into when it comes to UAW.
Yeah, and before we do that, though, what did end up happening when we're talking about UPS? Because the last time I really was, they had a tentative agreement. There was a couple of weeks before they were going to finalize it. And I'm always very suspicious until I see something actually finalized and being done. You know what? Before I actually believe they're going to live up to their end of the deal.
Yes, but sorry, were you, so I was just texting with our boy Nick from the UAW, who's going to join us on the live stream.
Yeah.
And so I missed the very first part of that. Were you asking about UPS?
Yeah, like where is that now? Because I feel like it's one of those things where we're given this idea that, oh, that's all been taken care of, go back to what you're doing. And then it doesn't come to fruition, but then it sort of loses steam in the news cycle. And then we're sort of nowhere.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And there's a lot of personal sort of work that all of us need to do on ourselves in that regard, because as you both have pointed out rightly, corporate media is not going to give us the tools we need to understand the context and the nature of labor struggles in this country. It's really just, strike may happen, strike didn't happen, next story, right? All the nuances kind of lost. But yeah, where we are right now, we're doing this live stream on Monday, August 21st, also the anniversary of the assassination of George Jackson in prison 52 years ago. Shout out to Comrade George. But we are recording this on August 21st, which means that we will know what the UPS Teamster membership voted on the tentative agreement that was reached at the end of last month tomorrow.
Okay.
August 22nd is the deadline for workers to vote on that tentative agreement that was reached about a week before the strike was set to happen. If folks remember, the strike at UPS involving around 340,000 UPS workers, a massive workforce, the largest private employer contract in the country. We had been building up to a potential strike for the better part of the past year. And at the 11th hour, but actually a little bit before the 11th hour, maybe the 10th hour, because I don't think a lot of us were expecting that when the Teamsters and UPS came back to the bargaining table after 3 weeks of negotiations more or less stalling, UPS came with a big package that was a market increase from its previous offer. Teamsters accepted that as the framework for a tentative agreement, and for the past 3 weeks, that tentative agreement has been making its rounds to the members around the country, folks at their union locals, in Facebook groups and live chats and in all manner of union democracy. Have been having the discussions with their fellow members about whether or not to vote this tentative agreement in as the new UPS master agreement. And it's kind of been at over the past 3 weeks, it's really been up to the members. I mean, I've had a lot of folks asking me like which way I think they should vote. And at that point, I just got to say, as a journalist, I don't feel like it's my place to be telling people members of a union I don't belong to, working at a job I don't work at. I mean, I want them to have everything. I want them to win as much as they possibly can. But I understand that there is a limit to my place in this fight. And so when we get to this point where it is up to the membership to vote, I think that it's important to sort of say it is up to them. I understand why folks were perhaps dissatisfied with the contract, particularly because they were really pushing, I think rightly, for part-timers to be raised immediately to a base pay of $25 an hour, which they definitely deserve. Instead, we've got around 23, immediately up to 21, but up to 23 over the course of the contract. So, I mean, that's not nothing, but it's still not enough. But there were major gains made in this contract fight, like the elimination of the two-tier system with the drivers. That's the 22-4 position, which essentially allowed workers driving those package cars the same way that, you know, other full-time, you know, like upper tier package car drivers are doing, but they're getting paid significantly less and they get fewer benefits, right? So this is going to be important when we talk about UAW, because current UAW union president Shawn Fain was voted in, like President Sean O'Brien of the Teamsters, as part of a reform slate to overturn years of concessionary bargaining, even corruption within the union. So Shawn Fain was elected with the backing of the Unite All Workers for Democracy rank and file Congress, of which Nick, the guest who's going to join us in a second, is a member, as well as an auto worker himself. They pushed for Shawn Fain. He narrowly got the presidential election, and the slogan was no corruption, no concessions, no tiers. So the fight against two tiers is very much going to travel over from UPS to UAW, and I think there are a lot of other workforces around the country that have been dealing with the scourge of multi-tiered employment systems that are seeing blood in the water and are actually going to be going on the offensive in their own contract fights.
That's awesome. See, now perfect segue.
Without further ado, Nick Levick of the UAW Workers, welcome to Generational Change.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you for what you do, first and foremost.
Absolutely. Welcome. And I felt bad. I saw you waiting, but I had to sort of, in my mind, come to like an end as to what happened with the last story, like, you know, before we move on. But obviously, there is definitely movement all around the country that we're seeing in terms of regular people being interested in, oh, wow, like workers and people are starting to like take a stand and, oh, maybe we can be part of this. And I think it's really important for people who aren't union people or even people that aren't union workers in any capacity to support it. Like it has to be a general public situation. It's because it's a class war. So I think it's just really important to point out that this is a labor thing more than a union thing, at least, you know, for me particularly. But yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll just say one thing and then I will shut up because I really want to hear what Nick has to say. And Nick, please tell me if I messed anything up in my last spiel. But Nick is great. We've just gotten to know each other, but I did a full interview with Nick for Breaking Points on the UAW contract fight, which should be coming out any day this week. He's incredible and has a lot of wisdom about, you know, working in the auto industry, about the union politics within the UAW, and about the significance of this contract fight. But just to kind of emphasize what you said, Jen, I mean, I think this is important, right? Because let us not forget that, you know, for as much excitement as there is in the country right now for organized labor, we are still, as the great Hamilton Nolan will put it, losing, right? We're still more or less on the back foot. I mean, labor has been on the backslide for the past half century. We have been losing union density. We are barely hovering above 10%, which means barely above 10% of workers in this country belong to a union. And in fact, a lot of workers who have worked at a union shop have not had good experiences with their union, right? And so like part of what we are doing here is not just getting people to only root for unions without any sort of critique or any sort of nuance or any sort of understanding about the good and bad sides of unions in the United States in the year of our Lord 2023, but to understand that unions, for all their problems, are still the best vehicle that working people have to organize ourselves independently and force our priorities and our concerns onto the ledger of, you know, the decision-making process of our employers and also the decision-making process of our governmental leaders, right? It is our way to actually make our voice heard by using the greatest strength that we have, which is our numbers, right? And so if you don't belong to a union, I promise you this conversation is still for you, not only because you could organize a union, you could join a union, you could reform your union, as Nick, like his fellow UAW members, did with the UAW. This was a union that had a whole shit ton of corruption and that members themselves were really pissed off about. And instead of saying, you know what, screw it, we're going to give up on this union and we're just going to like hope that the bosses treat us nicely, they said, no, get the corrupt assholes out of there, get the people who are actually going to represent us in there and fight like hell for what we deserve. So Nick, with that, I will toss it to you.
Yeah, talk about that switch. I mean, how long have you been involved in the union? So you have been there to see this switch, like, because that's interesting to me that there's like a changing of the guard there.
Yeah, so I'm actually third generation UAW. So my grandfather started in Kenosha, Wisconsin at AMC Rambler in the early 60s, hired into Janesville, Wisconsin in 1967, where my mom eventually got hired in. And then during the recession, I moved down here, and then I got hired in at Fairfax, Kansas. And it's been really interesting to watch this change, especially in the initial onset, right? So we got this referendum vote that was forced on us by the government for one member, one vote because of the corruption scandal that came out. And then that was like the caucus, the caucus that I belong to, United All Workers for Democracy, just kind of kicked into overdrive. And we were like, we got to win this, because once you know the history of the UAW, like this is a union that has been under sole control of the admin caucus for over 70 years. There hasn't been a competitive election in generations. So this was huge. And we won it, and it wasn't even close. It was, I got to look up the numbers because the same question came up when I was talking with Max. It was over 60%. It was over 65%. So it wasn't even close. And then we came to the referendum vote. We won that. We went on to the direct elections. So we assembled this slate of like ragtag leaders from around the UAW that came directly off the shop floor. Kind of ran them through an interview process to make sure like they were all legit, and then we just took off to the races. And we were really staring down people that had like they saw themselves as the union, like they saw us members as outsiders, and we pushed back against that. We won every single seat that we contested. We won. The president's race was close. Some people say that that's not it's not a mandate, but I completely disagree, because you're going up a power structure that's been sole control, authoritarian control for 70 years, and you win every single seat. That's a mandate. That's the membership telling you they are sick of the direction that we are going in, and we want to go in a new one. So that's what Sean Fain is doing. He's listened to the shop floor. He's been around. He went on tours during the campaign where he'd just go to location after location and talk directly to the workers. The entire slate did. So they're very in tune with what we want. Most of them came off the shop floors, so they know how it is. They know how we're treated, and they've worked very recently in the same conditions that we were working in. This 7 days, 12 hours a day. I mean, it's insane. It's insane the amount of work we're doing right now.
This is crazy. So, I mean, and this is not stuff that I would know or regular people would know, like what's going on in the UAW, but it sounds like you guys you're having like a revolution inside there. And that's really cool, because that's how it starts. So it has to come from there. The fact that you guys are regrouping, that's like the core of all of this stuff, because if the unions were all really on par with rank and file and really doing what they were supposed to be doing, that's the revolution. That's the point. We have to lure them away from their corrupt party cohorts and what other people that they're serving other than their rank and file.
And like what I would say to anybody in a union, like this is doable stuff. If you don't like the direction that your organization is heading in, you have the right as a member to organize with other members, to talk about your grievances, and to come up with a plan or a power structure to fix those grievances. Just because you don't have the one member, one vote in your union doesn't mean you can't push for it. Doesn't mean you can't push and have this goal and create your own caucus inside your organization. It's no different than unionizing your own workplace. Just because you're unionized doesn't mean you're organized. And just because you're organized doesn't mean you're unionized. So it's something that I highly encourage if anyone here is in a union, and you kind of feel like you're not getting what you deserve at the table, start talking to your coworkers, because you're not the only one.
Yeah.
And like if I could just add to that real quick, because I think this is a really important point, right? Because, you know, again, as folks who all collectively believe in the labor movement, in the power of workers and working people acting collectively, right? I mean, obviously we got our chips in that corner, right? And so we're going to want to root for that side, but that doesn't mean that we can just charge ahead uncritically and, in fact, irresponsibly, and pretend as if, as I said, it is irresponsible for people on the left, for people in labor, for people in the media to pretend as if there aren't a lot of workers out there who don't have legitimate gripes about or grievances with their unions, right? One of the most tragic stories that I've ever reported on, the hardest interview I've ever had to do, was with the family of Evan Seyfried, who was an Ohio Kroger worker for nearly 20 years, loyal Kroger worker and a UFCW member. He was bullied by his managers to committing suicide, and his union rep failed him. They did not protect him when he needed it most. Neither did Kroger, for that matter. I want to be clear. Kroger is the real culprit, but the union that was supposed to help him did not. They failed. And because of that, Evan is no longer here, right? That is inexcusable. There is no excuse for that. There is no excuse for the high-level corruption in the UAW that has led to multiple high-ranking officials going to prison, including 2 former presidents, right? I mean, but we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? Because we have to take back the very democratic engines that we need to build a better world. If those engines have been taken over by shitty people, we need to get rid of them, and we need to understand that it is up to us to do it. And I want to just highlight for people that it does get results, right? Because what Nick is talking about, the very fact that we are on this call having this conversation before in the midst of a contract fight between the UAW and the big 3, right, where President Sean Fain, backed by his members, swept in with a reform slate backed by Unite All Workers for Democracy. They broke, as Nick said, a 70-year autocratic one-party rule in that union. It took generations to achieve what we have gotten now, right? But that's how we have to see it. We have to see the fight as never ending, and it gets the results down the road, if not for ourselves, for our children, because it was in fact the government, after they investigated the Hoffa corruption, the mob corruption within the Teamsters, they forced the Teamsters to have direct democratic elections back in the early 90s, right? To ensure, because they saw democracy as the antidote to unaccountable power structures that corrupt. Which is exactly what you had happen in the upper echelons of the Teamsters, and even in the upper echelons of union local bureaucracies, right? You had unaccountable power structures that were not listening to the rank and file. But after the Teamsters were forced to have direct democratic elections of their union leadership, here we are 30 years later, that led to members electing Sean O'Brien, because they wanted a change from the Hoffa administration, which led to the UPS contract fight. And same thing well, not same thing, but a very similar thing has happened, as Nick said, in the UAW, which now is getting people excited after years and multiple rounds of concessionary bargaining, where workers like Nick have been losing ground. The union negotiators have been giving up more concessions to the automakers, because the automakers can always say, oh, if it's not profitable enough, we always might leave. If you guys want to be the next Flint, then keep pushing, right? Keep acting like you deserve better than we think that you do, and we will destroy your town. We will destroy your lives, right? But all I'm trying to say here is that if your union is bad, you need to fix it, right? Because it can be a weapon for you, but you and your coworkers have to be the ones to do it.
speaking with Max Alvarez of the Real News Network and Nick Levick of the UAW Union. Nick, this question's for you. You know, one of the things that we've seen, especially over the years, when it comes to the deterioration of the labor movement, particularly, we all know what the the inflection moment was. Of course, was President Reagan firing the air traffic controllers in the summer of 1981. I'm curious if you've seen any type of seismic shift over the past several years, even from what you may have heard from your grandfather during the days of JFK, your father during the days of Reagan, and to where we are today. I see a lot of complacency with a lot of people. This idea of, well, we have it bad, but it could be a hell of a lot worse. Instead of, man, we really outnumber the hell out of these guys. Maybe the power really is with us and not with them. I would say you have to make a choice. Either you're with workers or shareholders. You can't be with both. You have to make a decision. So how do you see it as far as the complacency and the fear of actually standing up for what you believe in to, at this point, where I think because of what we've seen between both the Trump and the Biden administrations, you can even say the same of the Obama and Bush administrations, Clinton, obviously, with the horrific policies that he passed under his administration, that we've come to a point with workers just basically saying, if it gets worse, it gets worse, but you know what, I'm going to make a stand.
I'm not sure how much worse it can get. I mean, medieval peasants had more days off than we do now. So, I mean...
to be able to actually work.
Yeah. I think is he frozen?
I think a lot of fear is being lifted, and I've seen a lot of change even since the Chicago Teachers Union uprising. I mean, even going back further than that, the Wisconsin uprising. I mean, we've seen it's been like this steady step up every single year of more labor actions, of more of just regular working people realizing what's going on. I think COVID played a really big role in a lot of the more militant actions you're seeing now. We were called essential workers, and we went out there. We did the jobs every single day, while the CEOs didn't. The shareholders didn't. They sat at home. They could work from home in some cases. And a lot of us were left to go out and keep society running. And when you're faced with that, and then you look at your paycheck and you're like, man, I risked my life for these people. And you look at your paycheck and it's not reflective of that. And you're looking at all the money that the CEOs made and all the stock buybacks that they engaged in, and how some companies have reinstated the dividend and they're paying out shareholders for doing nothing, for holding an electronic piece of paper. I think a lot of this is all kind of adding up and snowballing down. I think a lot of workers are losing the worry because we just went through a pandemic where they weren't even sure if the jobs were going to be there when they got back. And it put a lot of things into perspective for people, I think. So I think going forward, we're going to see a completely different labor movement, building on the militancy of past actions.
Good. So, and something that I've been curious about, because quite honestly, I thought the auto industry was basically dead in this country. Like, my understanding was that we really didn't do anything here anymore other than make weapons, and that mostly everything is from overseas. And I feel like between right to work states and outsourcing, they've so sufficiently screwed with labor in general, but just, I really didn't realize there was so much auto work. So I am curious, what are the key issues that you're dealing with? Because obviously, I mean, it's probably pay, but I'm sure there's a lot of other things in there that are just not right.
So right now you have one of our I don't know if I can say like which one's the top demand, but like we have temps on our shop floors, and these temps contractually can stay temps up to 2 years. But if they're laid off for, I think it's 30 days, their time restarts. So what happened during COVID when we were all laid off because of the government mandated shutdown? Well, all their time reset. So now you got temps that have been on there for going on 4 years, right? And then after they get hired in, then they got an 8-year progression to top pay. So you're talking about people that have worked a quarter of their life, 15 years, half of their working careers, and they're still not at top pay. How can you save for retirement? So one of the issues is we want to get temps hired in a timely fashion. For me, that's 90 days. I haven't heard anything official from International. I know they're pushing to hire all of the temps at ratification of our next agreement. Another thing we're fighting against is a two-tiered structure. So I'm tier 2. My mother is a traditional auto worker, so she has the benefits like a pension, retiree health care. She has more vacation hours than I do. She has more sub benefits. So like when we're laid off, her sub benefits go longer than mine do. So we want to eliminate the tiered structure completely. We want everybody. It's equal work for equal pay. It's the principal unions we're founded on. We can't have somebody who's a temp making $16.67 an hour working right next to somebody or even on the same job, just on a different shift, getting paid half the amount. It's mind blowing. You wouldn't see this as a CEO, right? Like the next step down from Mary Barra isn't working for like $16 an hour. It's just not going to happen. Another thing we want reinstated is COLA. So during the Great Recession, we gave up a lot of concessions to keep our companies afloat. They came to us. We opened up our contract and we gave concessions. The company said these concessions are going to be temporary. They're not going to be permanent. You're going to get them back once we're back on our feet. And we haven't seen that. So cost of living adjustments, COLA was one of the things that we lost during the Great Recession and something that we're looking to get back. It's still in our contract. It's just suspended language. We want the right to strike over plant closures. They have closed 65 plants in the last 20 years. And I think about it in a different way. So that's 65 communities. That's 65 Janesvilles. That's 65 Belvederes. That's 65 Lordstowns. These are all communities where these jobs were the jobs to have in those areas. So once they left, those areas were decimated. Janesville's still rebuilding. I don't know the full story on Lordstown, but I imagine it's quite similar to the one that I lived through Janesville. So we want the right to strike over plant closures so we can protect our work and we can protect the American economy and we can keep these jobs here where they belong. We want to get raises for retirees. They haven't had an increase in their pension in decades. Some retirees are making, I think it's like $900 a month. And that's just, it's a crime. We don't want our retired brothers and sisters to go destitute when they gave the best years of their lives to these corporations. This work is brutal. It breaks down our bodies. A lot of these auto workers are going to have multiple surgeries on their hands, elbows, shoulders, backs, necks, knees. And so these benefits, they're deserved. We're literally killing ourselves on the line to generate profit for them. The least they can do is take care of us in our later years. I feel like I'm forgetting some stuff, but
no, that's good. Yeah. No,
so, I mean, like, well, I was just saying, I mean, I think Nick is a phenomenal speaker, you know, and really laying this out in just the clear terms that everyone needs to hear. But yeah, just to there was a great piece in Labor Notes by Dan DiMaggio and Keith Brower Brown that kind of laid out some of the core demands as well. The ones that Nick listed, you know, the restoring the defined benefit pension and retiree health care, increasing pensions for current retirees, the right to strike over plant closures, a working family protection program. So if companies shut down a plant, they would have to pay laid off workers to do community service work, increasing paid time off, and you know, all like, I mean, Sean Fain has said it's the most, you know, like audacious kind of slate of demands that the union has put forward to the big three ever, really. And I think that, you know, that's good, right? He's saying, like, you know, like you're not dealing with your mama's UAW here. We are done with that concessionary bargaining shit. We are coming to get back what we are owed. And I really want to underline that part of it, as Nick said, because workers are owed this, right? This is not people asking for something that they did not earn, that they did not deserve.
It's not charity.
No, I mean, like, and I want to just put that into stark relief for people watching, because remember who we're talking about here. We are talking about the big three: automakers. We are talking about companies like GM and Chrysler that were bailed out by you and me and every other taxpayer 15 years ago to the tune of $80 billion fucking dollars. And when that happened, when the American taxpayers saved the big three automakers after they had mismanaged their own companies and put themselves in a precarious position going into the financial crash, and workers are the ones who bore the brunt of that, as we well know. As Nick said, the union, just like workers did in 1979 when the government bailed out Chrysler, right? There were strings attached to that bailout. It was union workers need to take less. They need to tighten the belt. They need to make sacrifices because everyone's got to make sacrifices so that we can stay afloat. Workers did that. They did their part. They did sacrifice 15 years ago, and they were explicitly promised that when these companies were back in the black, when the storm was over, when they were back to being profitable, they would be repaid for the sacrifices they had made. And how were they repaid? Right. Let us not forget. This is personal for me because in the first season of Working People, when I was still getting like my feet wet, I was editing the podcast myself. I was making contacts as best I could when no one knew who the hell I was. I did many interviews with GM workers during those layoffs that were announced the day that workers got back from Thanksgiving vacation in 2018, right? They came back from, being with their families. Monday morning, they heard that GM was going to be eliminating 14,000 jobs, including plant jobs and white collar jobs. And this was after GM was billions of dollars profitable, right? So they made it back to the black. And in fact, on top of that, they got a big ass tax cut from Donald Trump and the Republicans in Congress. And how did they repay, their workers, after they got that windfall, profit and tax? They cut more workers. They closed plants like Lordstown. I have to drive past that shuttered plant. There is an interesting story there. It kind of reopened, then it folded again. Then there was like a battery plant that opened, but they were paying workers $16 an hour. So, there's a whole other story there about Lordstown, but it's very, I think, illustrative of the situation that we're in, where companies like GM that got bailed out by the taxpayer then got, even more money from, corporate tax cuts by the likes of people like Donald Trump, who also went to Lordstown in 2017 and explicitly told the same workers that I interviewed, don't sell your homes. Don't sell your homes because we are bringing all those manufacturing jobs back. Literally within a year, Lordstown closed, and Trump had nothing to say to them. He tried to blame the union. He tried to blame anyone but himself. But you see the kind of, I don't want to make this a Democrat or Republican thing. They all fucking suck, right? But they are all kind of working for themselves, which is why we need to be supporting the workers who are actually doing what needs to be done to fight this crap, right? Even Biden has come out and said, please don't strike, please come to a deal.
I don't want to have to break their strike, so please don't do it. That's basically
I
what he's
can't
saying.
with him.
Yeah. And so the whole point there is that they're giving tax breaks to everyone, all their rich friends. They say they're pro-union, but they're not pro-union when it comes down to it. That is as clear as day. But there is a path forward here. There are ways to make gains. There are ways we can still win without getting mired in the bipartisan bullcrap. We just have to keep our eyes on the prize here and support folks like Nick, his union brothers and sisters in this contract fight. Because if the big three automakers are going to take that strike threat credibly, because they could be on strike as early as September 15th, it's coming up. Right. And what the UPS executives knew when they saw all those practice picket lines around the country, when they saw those rallies, they were like, oh, shit, these guys are fired up. They're actually ready to strike. And so if UAW members and the community and the rest of the country are rallying around auto workers and saying yeah, you're next, buddy, right? If you don't want to get, hit where it hurts, then you better come back to the bargaining table with some serious proposals. Now's the time to do that. We got 3 weeks before this contract is up.
Nick, can you talk about the class solidarity that exists with people that you work with? Because there's no question that you're working with supporters of both sides of the political aisle. And I like to think that more often than not, labor is the great equalizer. where that type of stuff just gets thrown out the door. No one really gives a damn about the distractions, as I like to say, like the latest story of the day that is going to divide and conquer most people. Because the things that don't get talked about are universal health care, living wage, providing the type of, back pay, for example, or time off. It's a variety of different things that we can cover. But the point being is whether you're a Bernie supporter, a Trump supporter, or something in between, there is a great equalizer that labor represents that the powers that be are definitely afraid of ever allowing the cat out of the bag, which is why what you guys are doing right now is so significant. And why I do worry that when push comes to shove, Biden will break the strike, because I think this country on both sides has been completely engulfed by corporate special interests. That's who they answer to. When I see people distracted about what happened in East Palestine, Ohio, this has nothing to do with Trump. It has nothing to do with Biden. It has everything to do with Norfolk Southern and what that organization represents as a microcosm of the very problems that we deal with on a regular basis. So can you talk about the importance of that class solidarity and how it wipes away all the distractions that seem to surround us every day?
So I'm left, and when I say I'm left, I don't mean I'm a Democrat. I'm left.
Same.
And so I can go to work and I can talk to a Trump supporter who literally works next to me. We're gonna get into a screaming match, but we're on the assembly line. What else is there to do other than mindlessly do your job? And we can talk, and through the after everything calms down, I can start engaging this person with some theory, right? And they will agree with everything up until I tell them which political party the theory comes from.
Yeah.
So everybody who works, everyone who toils knows that they are providing value, and all we want is our fair share of that value. I'm not going to get into whether or not we're going to abolish like class systems, but when it comes down to the workers on the floor in this moment, everybody's united. It doesn't matter who you support. And going to the Biden question, I'd like to think there's a reason why UAW leadership is withholding their endorsement of Biden.
Good.
They have said it in multiple live streams that they're changing up the way the UAW is going to do stuff. If you want our endorsement, you got to earn our endorsement. And just because you had it in the past doesn't necessarily mean you'll get it again. We need our allies to show up for us, because this is a battle. This is a battle against corporations. This is a battle against the corporate elite. This is a battle against the owner class that have been exploiting us and winning. So when Jim Cramer says Sean Fain's engaging in class warfare, it's only class warfare when we fight back. But as long as the corporations are winning, as long as minimum wage stays below a living wage, as long as you got corporations that are having to be subsidized by the taxpayer because they're not paying a living wage, then that's not class warfare. But the moment you start demanding your fair share, it becomes class warfare. So to circle back, everybody's united on this shop floor. I think it's something that's unique inside of the UAW because our history has a lot of left aspects inside of it. And you can purge out the leftists in the union through McCarthyism and everything, but you don't lose that ideology. And that's how powerful it is. And that's why so many labor organizations, and that's why the corporate America forced the left out of the unions, is because of how strong that is. So everybody on our shop floor, regardless of political party, no matter who you supported, we're all united. And I think that's true across the UAW. We might needle and poke each other about, oh, you're a Bernie bro, or you supported Hillary, or you support Trump. But at the end of the day, we know what this is all about, because we all know that each other has families at home. They have, loved ones that they got to take care of. And then they want the same thing every other worker wants. They just want a fair shake.
Couldn't have said it better. And that's really what it is. I mean, we try to do everything in our capacity, as Max does on his show, and our good friend Jordan Cheriton at Status Quo. And obviously, I always say, credit where credit is due to Crystal Ball at Breaking Points. She does these segments specifically, with Max to highlight these very key issues when it comes to the labor movement on such a big platform. And a lot of these other channels are not willing to do it. And I think it's not that necessarily, I don't think a lot of people support the labor movement. It's just that this conversation, as important as it is, it's not sexy. It doesn't get, it's not clicky. It's not like, oh, wow, what's the drama we're talking about here today? We're talking about people's ability to put food on their goddamn table.
See, that's why we have to talk about stupid crap like Jared Kushner to get the clicks and get people interested.
That's actually a relevant story.
And I know. And we generally do that. Like, we'll put something in there because you do got to kind of get that. But please try to have something substantially and meaty, afterwards.
I mean, I could not sympathize more with this point, as you guys well know, because I'm in that struggle with you, and I just wanted to publicly, just again, really thank you guys for constantly taking an interest in these stories, for bringing on rank and filers like Nick and lefty nut jobs like myself. But like, I mean, I really appreciate it, and I agree. Like, it may not seem sexy on its face, but I mean, you really hit the nail on the head, man. Like, when it comes down to it, like, we are talking about kind of the most essential thing there is, which is people's ability to live and live meaningfully and pursue happiness. It's one of the foundational pursuits baked into our country's founding, is that right to not only life and liberty, but the very pursuit of happiness. And how much liberty do we actually have when we are working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, when our employment, like our tier of employment and the pay that we take home is really just a matter of, like bureaucratic sort of like mixing things up so that we're taking home like, half the amount of pay that we should for the work that we're doing. I mean, like this, even though these topics may not seem sexy on their face, what they translate to is the immiseration of our fellow human beings and the wasting of our lives and our collective capacity to build the kind of world that we all deserve, right? Imagine what we could be doing with the American auto industry, to say nothing of the rail industry, to say nothing of, like just all the things that we could be doing in this country if these corporate vampires weren't literally siphoning off billions and trillions of dollars of accumulated wealth that we are producing with our labor. That's all money that's going out of the country, that's going out of our economies, that's going out of our communities. It's not going into the pockets of people like Nick, who then put it into the pockets of local businesses or what have you, right? It is going into the coffers of the 1%. It's getting stashed in the Cayman Islands. It's getting stashed in tax havens right here in the United States. Like they are sucking us dry, but the wealth is there. Imagine if we were able to reclaim that, if we were able to seize that and reinvest it back into our own productive capacities. We could have, light speed rail all across this country. We could have
a lot of cool things.
We have so many things, but in fact, that's the big thing I want to stress here at the end, because I know I've been yakking on a lot, is like for folks saying like, well, I don't get what the UAW members are asking for, or I don't get what the UPS workers are asking for, so I don't think anyone should get it. It's like, I promise you, man, people like Mary Barra, the billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, like they have more money than God. They are the ones taking everything from you. It is not your fellow worker who is screwing you over. The money is there. We have to take it back.
I think that there's something that always resonates with me when we talk about all of these things. It's that there's this fundamental concept among people that certain people and what they do is not worthy of a life of dignity. Like what you do is not important enough or sufficient enough or worthy enough that you deserve a life with dignity, even though it's all things that everybody needs in a functioning civilization. And there is this total elitism about, especially about when you're talking people that are non-college track people, tradespeople, labor people, and that it resonates to me. It's like there are people that truly think, and this is one of my favorite terms, that people need to know their place. And my parents do have friends that think that there's certain people that need to know their place. And that mentality is, I feel like, the biggest uphill battle that I deal with on a regular basis. And that sort of it permeates all of this. Because my thought is, I never care how rich the rich are. I really don't. You want to fly giant penis rocket into space, have at it, man. Go do that all you want. But like, I only care about how poor the poor are. So if we have like this baseline of living existence that we all agree, this is the standard of living as a civilization that our people are entitled to. And then everybody's in that, I'm good. Then I don't care how rich like that's not the problem. And these people really believe that they're more deserving and that there is this entire low class of people that their work, even though we need it done, they should have to work 3 jobs to live because one of their jobs isn't worthy enough for them to make a living.
I think there's also psychological components to the way that people, particularly in upper liberal class society, tend to look down on other people.
Yes.
They may be well read, but they're also extremely feeble individuals. They wouldn't know the first thing to do if they were, stuck on a conveyor belt line where they have to, imply parts, nuts and bolts into a wheel, much less change a tire. And I do think that there is a level of resentment that they harbor towards people like that. It's also why there was a significant amount, and there always has been, believe it or not, a significant amount of resentment towards the military. And I'm not talking about the military-industrial complex. I'm talking about people who serve in the military. Like, there is a level of selflessness and pride and bravery that exists within people that serve within the military, especially in the heartland, in the upper Midwest, in the South, that are not the most highly educated parts of the United States. Whereas the people who are in that liberal echelon class has a great deal of resentment towards the confidence and bravery that those who put their lives on the line have, because they're the first people who will send you off to war. They will be the last people who will pick up a weapon to defend you in war. And so that is a big crossover when it comes to this attitude. And I always say it's much worse on the liberal side of politics because they play it off as we're all for equal opportunity and all this. But the second the rubber meets the road with something like a living wage, proper negotiation at a job, and especially universal health care, then you find out exactly where they really stand. And where they stand is with their class. And that's why this is a class war. And that's why anyone who tries to throw a whole bunch of mud in there and think that we're just going to get distracted by the latest, what did this bigoted person say today? Or what did this other person say about, their job's more valuable than that other person's? It's all useless bullshit. All of it. The fact that we even have a shareholder class is an insult to workers.
Well,
everywhere.
right. That's the thing. So if they're making record profits, that's great.
Yes.
But there needs to be like conditions on when you bail out companies that the money is not allowed to go to stock buybacks and all that kind of crap.
Yeah, the level of
and yet that's where basically there was a study, right, that like it was an absurd number of like the percentage of the taxed windfall that corporations got from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It was like 80 to 90% of it went to stock buybacks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like it did not. It did the opposite of trickle down. It went like it did not come down to us. Like it's absurd. And I just wanted to highlight something that I wanted to mention earlier, is that we are talking about the big 3 automakers. They are not in the position they were in 2008. They have collectively, the big 3, they have raked in over $250 billion in profits over the past 10 years. And in the half year of 2023 alone, the big 3 have reported a combined $21 billion. They are doing just fucking fine. And yet Mark Stewart, the CEO of Stellantis, didn't even show up to the first day of bargaining. He was vacationing in Acapulco, Mexico, and yet he had the audacity to send a letter to the UAW urging them to base their demands on, quote, economic realism. The rich guy sitting in Acapulco, Mexico, who's the CEO of Stellantis, is literally phoning it in and telling union workers that they need to be more economically realistic. Like, I cannot stress to everyone watching enough, your fellow worker is not your enemy. That fucking guy is the enemy, and everyone like him is the enemy.
They always, that's the thing, is getting everybody to punch down and or sideways. And that is completely counterproductive. Maybe he'll get hit by that. Isn't there a hurricane heading up there? Maybe he'll like get washed out to sea.
He'll just get on his private jet and destroy the environment even more and figure out a way to make it worse. I mean, listen, I'm in commercial real estate. I am on the front lines of the most greedy sons of bitches in the world. So I can assure you that even in this industry, you always inject the working class mindset to everybody, because it's like looking into a mirror. You have to face reality about what everyone needs to do in order to accomplish these things. And Nick, you know as well as anybody. See this thing right here that you people use every single day of your lives?
You talk like as if you're somehow immune from it.
I never said
put
that I was
thing
immune.
down.
That's not
Okay.
the point. Most of I not. I use it for work. But my point is that people literally slave themselves to make this for people, and they complain about this idea that people are entitled to a living wage, or that, oh no, if you demand too much, they're just going to take your job away. They're either going to automate it or they're going to ship it away. And then I'm thinking,
They're doing that anyway.
you're so close to getting it. You're so close to recognizing what the real problem is here. And negotiation for your labor is where it begins.
And can we please say that the fact that it isn't okay to treat workers in other countries like shit, like this is a world global situation that we need worker solidarity. The fact that, I mean, yeah, there's definitely different standards of living based on cost. That's different in different places. So, I mean, someone living in some other country probably doesn't need to necessarily make the same amount of money, but they're same. Shouldn't there just be this universal standard of worker living that we all just globally agree that this is acceptable, and anybody who wants to work within these trades or trade organizations or whatever has to comply?
And I'll leave you guys with this thought. It's like when people complain on both sides of stupidity when it comes to the border crisis. And I say all the time, why do we have a crisis at the border? Because there is a labor uprising in this country, and the people who actually run this country want no part of it. So their attitude is simply this: open up the floodgates and let people in from countries that are desperate to get any job they can, and we'll pay them 10 cents on the dollar, and everyone will get fucked in the process. And that is ostensibly how this works, because labor has been crushed for so long, for so many generations now.
I just think we need to treat everybody the same in the different countries. Like, it's not okay to exploit them either.
No, that's the point.
If you look at like the Mexican, and this is what the big three always say, they want to be competitive, but
Right.
you gotta pull back the curtain and think about what that means. What they're saying is they want us to compete with Mexican auto workers. Mexican auto workers are exploited more than we are. They're paid $4 an hour. And they're building trucks, right? So this is another argument that comes up. Well, it's just going to get outsourced to Mexico, and there goes your labor costs and all this stuff. Well, they bring these trucks back, these Silverados, and they bring them back, and guess what? They cost the same as one that was assembled in America. So the only thing they want us to compete on is they want us to compete with a worker that they're heavily exploiting in a country with less strict environmental laws, and they want us to compete with that. And it's a race to the bottom if you engage the CEOs with their mentality. So we got to figure out a way to have solidarity across borders, especially in this industry, because you know what, the moment the Mexican auto workers they're kind of having their their rebellion moment. Right, they're bucking these company unions, and they're actually getting these independent unions in that will actually fight for them. Well, what happens when they raise their standards? Well, then the big three are just going to say, well, guys, you got to be competitive, because these people over here in Vietnam or Bangladesh or wherever you want to stick the company, they're going to work for less.
Yeah.
And if we keep on engaging in this kind of mentality, it's just a race to the bottom.
Well, and like just to kind of add to that, and then Nick, I don't know if you want to like end with any final notes about what folks can do to support y'all, or what we should be looking ahead to in the next 3 weeks. But just to build on that, a really important point that Nick brought up. It's not just a phrase, right? I mean, international worker solidarity is the path to our salvation. Robust, meaningful worker solidarity. And I will show, then there's an example here that we can actually look to. Nick just gave us one, right? Because remember, as I said, remember the timeline, right? 2017, Trump comes to Lordstown, says, don't sell your homes. We're bringing manufacturing back. The Monday after Thanksgiving in 2018, GM announces that they're going to lay off 14,000 workers and shutter the Lordstown plant, right? And this was like, the same year that they got the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act through, right? In 2019, workers struck at GM about a year later. Right. And this was a massive strike. In that time, when GM was experiencing a strike here in the United States, what they tried to do was offload more production in Mexico and try to get Mexican auto workers to undercut their brothers and sisters on strike here in the United States. And workers like Israel Cervantes at the Silao GM plant refused. They said, we will not be scabs, and undercut our American brothers and sisters. And they were fired for it. And they weren't protected by their company union. Fast forward to last year, Israel and his co-workers at that very plant, they rejected the company union that was not representing them, and they voted in an independent union. And now that movement, as Nick said, is spreading into different parts of Mexico. That is what international worker solidarity looks like. And for the reasons that Nick just laid out, it is what we absolutely need to turn the tide against the bosses, so they don't constantly have the ability to say, well, we're going to go find the cheapest possible labor we can, and then we're going to sell the product back to the same markets at the same price, and we're going to we're going to take all the difference for ourselves. We've got to put an end to that. And in fact, workers can be the driving force for that change. And you saw it there in Mexico, and I think that we can all be a part of it now. And with that, I promise I will shut up. Thank you guys for having me on. Nick, I want you to have the last word.
So what I would say to people is that, this isn't just the auto workers fight. It was never just about UPS and the Teamsters. This is about rebuilding an American dream that we have lost. And if we can't win this in labor, if we can't win things like a shorter work week, if we can't win things like eliminating tiers, if we can't win the basic principle that one job should be enough, 40 hours a week, you should be able to live on that. If we can't win that in labor, what does it spell for the rest of the country who's not protected by a union, who haven't yet come to the crossroads of having to realize they need to collectively organize to sit down and have equal power with the boss? If we can't win it here, if we can't win it now, I don't know when we will. So I would just say to everybody, know that we're not just fighting for auto workers. We're not just fighting for an extra dollar in our pocket. We're fighting for our communities. We're fighting for American manufacturing, for all of the communities in the Rust Belt that have been completely gutted and destroyed by these corporations who see the dollar sign at the end of the ledger, but leave out the human cost. We're fighting for more than just our demands. We're fighting for basic worker respect. So I would just encourage everybody, if you have a big 3 factory near you, come out and walk the picket lines, because there's no doubt in my mind come September 14th, one or all of us are going to be out on strike, and talk to those workers, because you're going to realize in my plant of 2,000, that's 2,000 different stories. That's 2,000 different reasons of why they're walking the picket line. So I'd just encourage everyone to come out and support and do whatever you can, even if it's just sharing on social media. Public opinion is very important.
Can't thank you guys enough. And again, solidarity with labor all day, every day. I'm not fully aware of one that is located in Florida.
I don't think there's one in Florida. I'm trying to think, like, what is our closest? Probably, I don't know.
Maybe Georgia, but nevertheless, a lot of the auto plants are in the upper Midwest.
Yes,
That's
I know that they're not here.
And Nick, to all of your brothers and sisters who work on the lines every day, thank you for what you do. You are the backbone of America, despite what other people would like you to believe. If you're not there, this country falls apart, no matter what anyone else says. And Max, thank you for always covering this on the Real News Network. And again, shout out to Crystal Ball for putting this front and center as part of the show. Hope others will do that as well. Let's definitely have a follow-up. Keep the conversation going, and we're with you all the way.
I'm going to find out what happens with UPS workers ASAP is what I want to know.
We're with you all the way, brother. Keep fighting the good fight. And
Thank you
guys
both. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, Max.
Solidarity.
See you guys. Obviously, a great conversation, and we're obviously very appreciative of everybody in the chat who understands the importance of that. And look, we see the messages, guys. We realize that, we're not Tim Pool with, 50,000 people watching right now.
No, I wish.
It'd be nice. I mean, I wish 50,000 people could hear this message right now about the importance of union labor. And look, we're friendly with Tim Pool, but he decided to say on his show tonight that billionaires paying more taxes is not the solution to the actual problem. It's not the solution, but it's a solution.
It's part of the solution.
It is.
It's part of the strategy of the solution for many reasons. And it isn't because I think we need their tax dollars in order to be able to have things, but there is absolutely a purpose for it.
Well,
and
here's what I would say when it comes to the billionaires not paying their fair share, and they don't. Don't ever complain about the deficit, ever. The biggest reason we have a deficit is because we spend more than we take in. Hence, not paying taxes. See how that works? And that is part of modern monetary theory. It's not a question of whether we can afford it because we can. It's a question of where are the funds in order for us to pay for it. It's being hoarded. The idea
Hoarders.
that somebody could be worth $200 billion is just insane. It's insane. You people wouldn't even know what to do with $20 million, which is 0.1% of that money. Or is it? No, it's 1%. That's 1% of that money. You wouldn't know what to do with that. Oh wait, no, I think I'm off. I'm way off.
I'm math challenged. So
no, I was right. 0.1% of $200 billion is $20 million. You know what $20 million equals for just about anybody on this planet? A lifetime of financial bliss.
I wouldn't even know what to do with that. I'd end up giving most of it away to some foundation or something, and I'd have to. I wouldn't even know what to do with it.
And that's 0.1% of the money that Jeff Bezos somehow has, that Elon Musk somehow has, and probably somebody like Bill Gates has. The Walton family. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Metalopoly, I don't debate. I just don't. It's not my jam. I'll discuss. And I would have Tim Pool on. I mean, I don't agree with him on a lot of things. I think he's a nice enough guy personally. He was very nice to me. He was very respectful. I don't have any real beef with him. But I don't debate. There's nothing that I want to debate. I don't want to debate with anybody. I really don't. I'm willing to listen to everybody's ideas and stuff, but I don't need to debate.
And therein comes Don P. of the UAW. Increasing our taxes will relieve the infection, but you aren't keeping the infection from coming back at a later date. I guess you're referring to I'm not going to say it. Forget it. As long as capitalists are allowed to own the means production. Correct.
It's not my jam. That's not my jam either.
That's why I am a supporter of a hybrid system. I believe that workers have as much right to the means production as any owners do. And for those who do not believe that, then clearly you do not support labor. Either you have either you do support labor or you don't. I think it's pretty clear. And that if we had a very strong labor movement in this country, as we did during the most prosperous years of this nation's history, from FDR through JFK, those were the most productive years this country's ever had.
It floors me that people are averse to this idea of everybody just having a decent life. Like, how are we averse to that? We've been brainwashed into thinking we can't have things. That's what I think it is, because we've been brainwashed into this pie concept that people are so concerned that if someone else is getting something, that means they're not getting something. I really believe it. It's almost like it's ingrained in us, because the reality is it makes no sense otherwise to think of, why would I not want other people to have a baseline standard of living? And no, I don't think everybody necessarily should have the exact same amount of money. I don't think that somebody who didn't go to lots of graduate school and do a lot of studying should make the same amount of money as someone who did. I think there should be a difference, but the person at the bottom needs to be within a certain percentage of the person at the top, and that needs to move proportionately so that the person at the bottom can live without killing themselves.
Sure.
That's all we're talking about here. Like, I'm not suggesting that the rich people have to, I don't know, sell a yacht or something. We wouldn't want that to happen.
No, we do.
Although I am in favor of taxing those things at exorbitant rates.
I am as well. Anything that is
luxury
an
items?
absolute insane luxury.
Yeah, those things should be taxed at exorbitant rates. I think it should be just some ridiculous thing.
Yeah, and that is what should happen.
And I think there should actually be something where that money actually could do something interesting. I don't know what, because that's more of a sales tax situation, not an income tax situation. So I don't know. I think that if states did that, that could be helpful to things.
So I'm going to give you guys a good example of where the real problem lies when it comes to the, I guess what you would call, just Democratic Party hardliners that want you to believe that the Democratic Party is actually working on workers' behalf. In reality, they're not. They're no different. I mean, look, are there certain, periphery differences between the two major parties? Yes. But when it comes right down to it, when it comes to making these significant differences, you're not getting that. There's a reason why Joe Biden, based on his record and what he's done since he's been president, is as anti-labor as it gets, especially for a Democrat. This is it's like
I don't even need to make a comparison to anybody else. Like, he is completely anti-labor. He just is. He's an anti-labor person.
Any policies that Clinton passed during his administration to gut labor, and the same thing now. When you break the strike of the railroad workers, you're sending the smoke signal across the bow to every labor union in the country. Get out of line and you'll get the same treatment.
I don't understand how anybody, look, they're going to come out and say he's like the most pro-labor president. You can give anybody any superlative, apparently. It doesn't even matter. Nobody checks it. It's, but you could call yourself whatever you want. But that makes about as much sense to me as Jews for Jesus. I don't understand. This is not a pro-labor person. He's not done a single thing for labor. What has he done for labor? Because if you're going to claim somebody's pro-labor, all I saw him do was crush the railroad workers. That's what I've seen him do for labor.
And a strong point to be made here is that one of these, if you guys follow any of the big Dem Party sycophant accounts you've obviously seen called to activism, this is a person who poses as somebody who's really in favor of the labor movement, but when push comes to shove, like a lot of others, they're just there to push the Democratic Party agenda. And I'm talking about the Democratic Party establishment agenda. So this person decides to put out a message today about this gentleman, Philip Heron. This is the final photograph of Philip Heron crying in his car literally minutes before taking his own life. He was a single dad with 3 kids, struggling with crushing debt of over $20,000, who was desperately waiting for a payday loan he'd applied for. First of all, let's stop right there. He's applying for a payday loan, so he's applying for a vulture loan, which means his situation would only have gotten worse if he actually got the loan.
Right, that wouldn't have been a solution. That was not going to help the situation. That just prolonged the inevitable.
But it was paid in arrears with a 5-week wait time. That wait time drove him deeper into debt. And when he died, he had $4.61 in his bank account and clearly couldn't see any other way out. Like a lot of people, especially men, he kept all this to himself. Nobody else knew how bad things were getting. This poor man even had to tell his children that Santa Claus wouldn't come this year. And in a suicide note, he wrote they'd be better off if he wasn't here anymore. Rest in peace. First of all, the level of exploitation in that tweet is so insufferably disgusting. I cannot even put it into words. Because anyone who knows anything about the crushing debt that people suffer in this country can easily be traced against the very policies that the Democratic Party claims to support and never does a goddamn thing to change. Ever. Ever.
Oh, Florida payday lenders are out of control. I think we're like somewhere between like 300, 400% interest on them. Like, that's just acceptable to do on some of those.
That's been one of Debbie Wasserman Schultz's biggest financial contributors for many years. So when somebody is out there and they're making a post of that nature, they're really trying to convince you that if we just elect more Democrats, that's going to solve the problem. And that's why he's suffering immensely, even though the Democrats have been in charge for almost 3 years. Doesn't matter, because it's all part of a propaganda plan to not actually deal with the real problem here. Why is the guy in such incredible debt? Well, could it be because we don't have a living wage?
It could be anything. It could be that he had a healthcare situation with one of his kids. It could be so many things like that. That's the problem with this is we're not talking about deadbeats or people that need to be going to Gamblers Anonymous. We're just talking about regular people that just can't afford to live because their cost of living exceeds what they're capable of earning. It's not complicated.
And what in the F is that? I don't care if it's a man or a woman. I don't give a rat's rear end who is covering. The fact that you put that out there, you put that guy's name out there, his effing kids are going to see this.
It's horrible.
Do you know how exploitative that post is?
Well, isn't that the era in which we live? That's the whole point.
I remember, I'm looking at this thing and I'm just thinking,
that's sad. That's so sad. It's just sad. And there's so many people that are in a bad way. I know people that are in a bad way. It's not good.
Rule to the wise, call to activism if you see this show, and I hope you do. If you're going to post something about a person who committed suicide, first rule of thumb with somebody who commits suicide, don't post their fucking name. Number one rule, especially when they have a family.
But he put it out on social media or not?
They put it out on social media. He made a video, and they decided to. I don't know. I didn't even know. I only know about it because they put it out there.
Well, do we know that he didn't put it out somehow as well?
I highly doubt he put it out there talking about his name. What he probably did was he put out a brief manifesto before whatever he did. I don't care how he did it. He just did it, and ultimately said, "I'd be better off dead than if I were alive." You put that post out there, and you don't even call for solutions. You're not even saying, wouldn't it be better if we lived in a country if we had universal health care?
Well, they don't care about the solutions. They just want to be able to use that for fundraising.
Like, honest to God, I'm looking at that and I'm just thinking, what are you hoping to accomplish by posting this? Like, what is your goal?
Money and clicks.
And then what they add, and then in the subtweet, they mention, and if you're thinking about suicide, call the suicide prevention line because that's going to solve the problem. Because that's what's going to solve it. Don't kill yourself. I'm sorry you can't afford to live, but here's an idea. Why don't you call the tip line? Maybe they'll help you. No, we are seeing this all over the place.
It's bad.
There's a reason why people pick up a gun and decide that they're going to just go shoot people. Do you think that the psycho that picked up the gun in San Bernardino County, California, who didn't like seeing the pride flag, decided that he was going to shoot the shop owner of that place, and now that's a national story? You don't think that person may have just been at the end of their rope? And may very well be a bigot for circumstances that are either in or out of their control. You never hear the backstory as to what leads a person to pick up a weapon and decide that I'm going to go after a person who's holding up a pride flag, because that's what's set them.
Right. Well, no, because what they do is they just jump on the gun issue. They don't go one step deeper than that. So they just all jump in and focus on the gun issue. And I'm not saying that there isn't also a gun issue. But that's not the issue of those things. The fact is that there's that many people that want to do harm to people is the bigger issue.
Angie, great to see you, Angie. Great point. There was a dude in Houston who faked his disappearance over high interest short-term loans. Said he felt that was the only way.
Yeah, and
again, not nearly as bad as feeling that you have to take your life, but it's in a similar context. People are so desperate at this point. And I still hear people suggesting that it's really not that bad out there.
I don't know what they're looking at. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's really bad.
It's bad. And I'm down like this horrid, depressing book spiral. I'm like 3 or 4 books in a row that are just pretty morbid.
If you really care about what's going on, then you know what the reality of this moment means. It means that there's a propagandized population on both sides that have been convinced that there is no real way out of this and that you just have to accept it. Much like a lot of people who think that there's no way out of the climate crisis, that there is no way to save yourselves, that you're just going to have to adjust. And if you die, you die. We're not going to reduce our fossil fuel consumption.
No, people don't want to deal with the real solutions about that. And that's what's really kind of concerning to me. That's where I get somewhat, I'm not defeatist. I'm just a realist. Like, I recognize that the earth is going to do what the earth is going to do. And we only have the control. I think that there is a lot of hubris amongst people in terms of what they think they can get away with the planet and actually beat it.
Does anybody like in media or anywhere, have the guts to actually call out one of these celebrity bums to their faces about using a private jet? Do you know that one private jet trip that is the equivalent of flying cross country is the equivalent of how much gas consumption you personally will use in your entire lifetime?
And yet that to me pales in comparison with things like big ag and the military industrial complex.
Well, it's all
and it is, but I mean, like, again, I don't cared about it. I don't want to perpetuate the notion that it really is a personal responsibility thing, because it really isn't. We can take personal responsibility and for how we live, and I do the best I can. But the big issue that needs to be dealt with is not something that's going to be done by shaming people into getting rid of plastic straws in their towns. That's not going to solve the problem. So I feel the same way when you even call out somebody taking their own jet. It's like, okay, fine, but that's not the issue. That's not the problem. So I just then call the problem is way bigger than that. And I don't think it's an individual thing. It isn't. We're made to feel that way so that nothing else gets done on a massive scale. We're made to feel like it's on us. It's on us to just get electric cars, which also, by the way, is, ridiculous, seeing as they're plugging into the main grid. But,
I listened ever so briefly to the commentary that Bill Maher had with Marianne Williamson regarding how bad things really are. And I can assure you that there are people who think that Marianne did a good job. She didn't do a good job because she didn't cut him up at the knees the way he needed to be cut up. You can't be gentle with people that are that rich and that out of touch. You have to shame the hell out of them and make them literally feel it in their gut that they'll never forget it. Bill Maher talks about, well, if you go to Skid Row, well, of course you're going to see people that are suffering there. And you live in Los Angeles, California. I mean, talk about a place where things can be, how much more obvious could it be that things are bad? And they're really bad. You have to go for the throat. You cannot be gentle about this anymore because people are dying.
But that's not everybody's job to do.
I'm not saying it's everybody's job, but I'm saying that if you're wondering why there's this exploitation in society to put up on blast about how a person committed suicide because they felt that that was their only option. And now let's look at the person who committed suicide, but let's not actually talk about what would need to be done to alleviate so many of these crises. It's never, don't kill yourself. It's how does somebody get to the point with children? And that guy looked young. I think he said he was 34, that he committed suicide. Lord knows his children are probably pretty young. How does a person get to a point where they feel that their only solution is to end it all? That's pretty scary.
I think it's higher than people realize. I think it's high. It's really high. And it's definitely high amongst young people.
I agree. And this is also why I think a lot of people are going to flirt very heavily with a Vivek Ramaswamy.
So what do we have coming up on Thursday?
Interestingly enough, speaking of Vivek Ramaswamy, we are going to have a friend that Jen made, Malik Abdul, who is in the GOP and is in Washington, D.C., and we will be discussing the debate on Thursday, as well as Trump's appearance on Tucker Carlson. And we will see exactly what this debate is going to be all about.
You're going to have to forward me any relevant clips because there's no way I'm watching that debate. I just cannot I cannot allocate brain space to, not only do I not do debates, I don't want to watch debates.
I don't really want to watch it either. I'm only doing it because it's necessary.
No, and I think it's important for us to have I need the Cliff Notes. That's the thing.
Well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to break it down that way.
Because I can't, this is why we have to have somebody on to talk about it, because I don't want to watch it. So we'll get the recap from one of the party people. Right? So you'll appreciate that, Metal. We're bringing on a Republican.
And Don, what I mean by a mixed system is...
And don't say you guys. I want to be very clear. He and I are different people in our beliefs on this. So he could speak for him.
A capitalist system cannot exist and actually provide for the common good if there isn't an equal balance with socialism. It's not possible. You have to have a balance of the system in order for it to work. Hybrid democracies are what exist in the most thriving nations in the world: Germany, Japan, Scandinavian countries, even the UK, Australia. This is where it works. That's what they have. They have a mix of capitalism and socialism.
Yeah, I think that there's not any ideal system, but Don, I'm probably a lot more with you than he is. I have a pretty bad taste in my mouth about capitalism in general. I just don't like it. I think it's just inherently implodes on itself because of human nature and human greed. Also, I am not particularly capitalistic myself. I'm not into like things in my, like, it's just not something that is very important to me. So I'm not a fan, but I think that it's out of control here. So even if I were, let's say, a supporter of capitalism in general, I would say if we don't do something about it, it's going to implode on itself, because capitalism can only survive if there are consumers, and we're running out of consumers when people can't afford to live.
And a lot of people on the political right admit that the system is broken.
Yeah.
Like, this is not a lefty, dogma, if you will. This is almost everyone universally, with the exception of the very hardened, particularly older, and very propagandized people on the political, I'm not even going to say it's the political left or the political right, just the people that are politically propagandized within the party infrastructure. And that is definitely more so within the Democratic Party infrastructure, because on the Republican side, they broke from orthodoxy and went with somebody like Donald Trump. The people in the Democratic Party establishment orthodoxy couldn't wait to get somebody like Joe Biden into the White House. So that still remains to be seen. I think the difference on the left, of course, is that the Democratic Party has much stronger guardrails from preventing any type of a systemic takeover. That's why somebody like Trump could very easily get in again. And that is why, probably not surprisingly, that somebody like Vivek Ramaswamy has easily soared to the #2 spot in the GOP. And he's going to keep climbing. So I do see where a lot of the agreement is. The problem that a lot of people on the political right end up having is they come up with this notion of, if we just fixed capitalism, what we have now is cronyism. Yes, you have cronyism, which is creeping into fascism. And guess what?
I think we're there.
This is exactly what a capitalist system ends up becoming.
That's the problem, right? Like, I think, and it's frustrating that we deal with people that are so like anti the idea of Marxism, but they don't even know what it is, when in fact it should be required reading, because if everybody read that, they would understand the potential perils of capitalism and be able to put in certain safeguards as to ward against it imploding in itself, which is what is inevitably going to happen. But instead, you just get labeled a commie and cast aside when I'm just trying to be pragmatic. And if you want to keep your capitalism and keep the money flowing, you got to have consumers. And so that's what happened back with FDR when he put in the New Deal. It was not because, we're going to have socialism. It's no. We have to salvage capitalism. And you do that by giving people income so that they can buy things. So I just think, even if I were a fan of capitalism, which I am not, I would have to acknowledge that we're doing it wrong. We're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
That's what I can say about
And
it.
if we can all agree on the corruption aspect of the system that we have created, the people who object to the notion of socialism say, well, eventually you run out of other people's money. Well, here's the problem with capitalism. Eventually you run out of people to exploit.
And you can't eat your money.
And you can't drink oil.
So, but it's interesting that people that can, anybody who considers government programs or government funding as it's sort of like that somehow is socialism, is the government is giving you something. At what point did you stop realizing that the government is ours, that the government is of us, for us? So would you rather the government's money be going to the wealthy people, or would you rather the government's money be going towards us? Like, it's so interesting. It isn't the government's money. There is no government. Like, there's not like that's us. That's our money. So it's not a handout. It's not charity. It's the distribution of our own money.
We still haven't figured out that so many of the problems that exist are problems that are easily corrected. And I know I get heated sometimes, but I was more heated just because I don't like the grifting aspect of politics. I don't like people that deliberately take advantage of other people. Like Maria Cardona, who has been a sycophant for the Hillary Clinton wing of the Democratic Party for a very long time, going on national television the other day and saying that Dr. Cornel West is out of his mind running for president and that the economy under Joe Biden is actually doing extremely well. She knows that she's lying. And if she doesn't know that she's lying, then she's the biggest useful idiot I've ever seen. But I have pretty strong confidence in saying that Maria Cardona knows exactly what she's saying and exactly what she's doing. Because what she does is be a propagandist for the establishment that likes things as they are. But there has to be some voices on the Hill in particular that have to recognize that they're running out of time. People are not buying this anymore. And eventually there's going to be a massive unification of workers around the country. And eventually they're going to come for the people in charge. Because that's what's going to happen.
I just honestly, that's what I hope, is that we could at least direct the anger in the correct direction. You know, take up your grievances with the people that are responsible for your grievances, not the people that are like below your weight class. The whole bullying, punching down, kicking down, all of that in any aspect is disgusting. So, and that goes for any group that has lesser power than you.
And this is why I've said all along, the solution is ultimately the mixed economy. That's the way it works. Because if somebody who votes safely, GOP, says this, and most people who would be voting on the left would be agreeable to a hybrid system of capitalism and socialism, the solutions are pretty clear.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not suggesting that we get rid of capitalism. I'm suggesting that we take certain industries off the profit table as they are in many other countries.
Healthcare, education, and corrections.
Yeah.
Those are the three main, and there may be others.
Yeah, but basically those are things that need to not have a profit motive involved. And the only way to salvage.
And anybody who makes a statement like that has never taught a day in their life.
Which same people think teachers
Some
are
people,
lazy
well,
and overpaid? Based on what? The same people of whom?
Whoever is making the statement, like, no, I've heard that statement made.
Which one?
That teachers are lazy.
But they're comparing it to which same people said
I
what?
just think they're talking about teachers in general, which is why there's been a revolution, if you will, for charter schools. But the truth of the matter is,
that's not helping.
Teachers are exploited. Teachers have been exploited. Do you know that the average teacher has to buy school supplies for their students?
Yeah, no. It's and they're expected to do 10 jobs. They're expected to. By the way, they also are, a lot of cases, they can't even go to the bathroom.
Have to be the parents, and it's flipped, and it's
they're
so
not allowed to
flipped
go to
on
the
its
bathroom.
head. It's so flipped on its head. It's so
these teachers, and then you cut back on the budget to the point where let's say they had somebody who would come in like a clerical person and relieve teachers. They could at least go to the bathroom. All those positions have been let go. So now teachers are also having to be the librarians. Teachers have to be everything. They have to be the guidance counselor. Teacher, get out of here with that.
Trust me, guys, are getting to the point.
Are there lazy teachers? Yeah, yes. There's lazy everybody.
Correct. And I can assure you that one of the goals of the privatization of the education system is to eventually have AI teacher kids. That's the goal. You're not going to have any human interaction. You're not going to have teachers in the classroom.
It's a travesty. I think that in general, we just, the way we treat teachers is very indicative of how we value education. And that is why we are probably the dumbest country in the developed world.
And this is also why.
And I mean dumb. Like that we put up that clip that I mean, like, we do stupid at a whole new level in this country. It's true.
And this is why what Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the like did to Bernie Sanders in 2016 is going to have reverberating effects for many, many years to come. The Democratic Party's decision to systematically rig the electoral process against an economic left populist because it went against the donor class of their party infrastructure, Wall Street and Silicon Valley. They decided that it was best to do what was necessary and take the heat after the fact.
Agreed, Don. Agreed.
But as a result, what we have now seen is the complete systemic breakdown of the fact that we have two corporate parties that do not answer to labor. and this is only getting worse.
Right. We don't have a Labor Party.
You have somebody like Vivek Ramaswamy, who is going to potentially ascend to the presidency, and he is a wealthy, I think he's a hedge funder. He's a Silicon Valley guy. And he basically believes in the total gutting of the federal government.
And yeah, Don is saying that the idea of that YouTube nationalized, I think that all of that stuff needs to be nationalized.
You know, we don't go around making big announcements about this because we don't depend on this for a living, but our channel is demonetized. And you want to know why it's demonetized?
Always.
Because we were targeted, not because we actually did something which YouTube, in writing, admitted that we didn't do anything.
But because of this crony system, it's easy for someone who just wants to mess with us or me to, you know, call in a favor and, oh, whoops, we're demonetized. And now there's nothing we can do until when? Like, we have to wait a few months.
2.5 months until we can get our show up and running again.
And then we can apply again.
And who's to say that it won't happen again?
Because somebody just decided that. No due process, no repercussions, no nothing.
You know where our money goes? It goes to things like this.
What? Oh, I thought you were running to this. I'm like, that's not where their money goes.
This is where the money goes. It goes to homeless care packages. It goes to our producer. It goes to our shorts consultant.
We don't make anything.
We don't make them.
I've been working for free for, I feel like, 5 years now.
The most that we've ever done with any of the money that has ever come in for ourselves is grab lunch. That's it.
It is. That's the only thing we ever put on the company card is if we're out canvassing and we get food.
But apparently we're such big threats to the establishment.
That they need to
small but mighty
demonetize
channel,
us.
we're not even at 13,000 subscribers, and they feel that we're a threat. That they got to cut our means of making a few $100 a month off.
You know what's so
Wow.
what's so funny to me? Like they anybody that feels so threatened by us, and I'm sitting here thinking, you have no idea. No idea.
And thank you, off the rails. Yes, Vivek is very much, he's Silicon Valley guy. I didn't mean to mess it up with the whole hedge fund thing. But the bottom line is, he is somebody who is going to be very appealing, extremely appealing. And I don't agree with most of what he says. Do I agree with a number of things that he says? Absolutely. But I also know from his economic perspective, he's totally libertarian. Like, abso-freaking-lutely is he. If there is a guy who's a true, like, libertarian mindset getting into the White House, oh, it's Vivek Ramaswamy, 100%. And so as a result,
yeah, I don't love that at all.
So here's the problem. Because the Democratic Party, led by the likes of Debbie Wasserman Schultz on behalf of Hillary Clinton, decided to cut off Bernie Sanders at the knees, and because the squad has decided that they would rather go along to get along than actually take any chances, you are not going to have any populist-like pushback against Vivek Ramaswamy. He is going to be extremely appealing to a lot of independent voters.
And remember, again, we're in a very low bar situation for any old school Republicans that just don't like Trump because they just don't like him.
Correct. And
So, you know, he doesn't have to be great.
That's the whole problem with denying a real, and even if the Democratic Party really had some type of a primary process, it doesn't matter. They still have super delegates.
It doesn't matter anyway.
The system is still in place to ensure that whoever they pick will ultimately be the nominee.
We have to get that clip, that news clip of Debbie when she was on with CNN explaining why they have to have super delegates to keep it. It was basically in my mind, and I know she didn't say this literally, but I heard like, wah, 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 so the commoners can't have an opinion.
Well, that is,
but
what
it
she
is,
said.
it is what it isn't. But yeah, I'd love to get that clip because she really did. If you read between the lines, that was the point. We can't let the grassroots have the ultimate say. It was something like that, and it was just like, yeah. We don't want the peasants to have
And
to
here's,
say so.
and here's the final thought, guys, and this is what you need to know. You will have a much easier time having a conversation about labor rights with a Trump supporter than you ever will with a Hillary supporter.
Absolutely.
And that's a fact.
Absolutely.
And that's,
Absolutely.
And that's the shift.
I haven't been to any labor function, whether it's a picket, anything that we've ever gone to where there were Hillary people. They're always Bernie or Trump people. Or DeSantis people, but like I have not once talked to labor people, with the exception of certain teachers. Okay, with the exception of certain teachers that are Hillary people. None of those.
I wouldn't even say that they're Hillary people. They just voted for Hillary.
Yes, but there are probably teachers that are still like that. Sure. But I'm just saying, most working people, labor people, you will find way more Trump people than Hillary people.
Yeah, 100%. If you have not seen the interview with Tim Black and Dr. Cornell West, which
Please
aired
watch
earlier
it.
today, watch it.
It
Highly
was very
recommend.
good.
Highly recommend.
Yeah. And what do we have coming up?
Again, Thursday, we will be having a GOP primary recap
A
discussion.
post game on the
Post-game.
GOP primary, but we have other things coming up besides that. I saw something else that I was invited to that looked interesting that I got that you scheduled. Never mind. I saw that you scheduled something else.
Yes,
but
well, I
couldn't
put some
imagine.
additional things on the calendar.
That's what
as
I'm
well.
saying.
Uh,
We have Ryan Grimm coming.
Ryan Grimm will be coming on the live stream to talk about his book next Thursday.
I've already finished that book. It was the start of the depressing context of books that the rabbit hole I've been going down.
We will figure out something for Labor Day, probably some type of panel, maybe even have good old buddy Jordan Sheraton of Status Quo. He is definitely more of a daytime individual. We'll probably do a daytime show on Labor Day, so that'll make more sense to probably have him come on, talk about exactly, because Jordan is going to be on the road covering what's going on with the UAW strike. I'm telling you guys,
I'd love to know where our closest place is.
If UAW does strike, it's going to be a big deal, like a really big deal. And then will there be any type of labor solidarity nationwide? Will others decide to do that?
I wish.
So that's what we'll end up
I
with.
hope so. I hope so.
Smash the like button, subscribe, share, do all those wonderful things we ask. Enjoy the debate on Wednesday if you're going to watch it, or the Trump-Carlson interview, which will be a very entertaining interview, I have no doubt. We'll see you Thursday.